you are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
Men, we have a big announcement at the end of this podcast episode, so make sure you listen all the way to the end. We're starting up a new program in March called TKM Reflections, and we're going to be guiding men to take uncommon action. If you don't want to wait till the end, you can go to thekineticman.com/sign-up, thekineticman.com/sign-up, and go fight on your own right now. Take uncommon action. Enjoy the show. Hey, David, do you want to just go ahead and get your standard naval aviator joke out of the way? Do you want to just go ahead and do that for us?
No, man, you know what? I don't want to do that today because it's I'm super excited about this conversation, and I figure most of our listeners know that a naval aviator will let you know that they're a naval aviator very, very quickly into the episode. I'm actually surprised that you don't introduce yourself, and this is now like almost 300 episodes. I'm shocked that you're not like, hey, Stuart, naval aviator here. And I'm just actually shocked you don't do that.
I don't find my identity in being a previous naval aviator, but
that's what you say every time you tell somebody you're an aviator. I don't find my identity in this, but just so you know, like I flew helos and a number of platforms in the Navy. Not important. I just want you to make sure, we get past that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's not about you or me, Stu. It's not about you.
That's true. That's true. We have Kegan Gill on today. Kegan, man, it's great to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time. And man, what an incredible story you have. I'm excited about getting into it. So let's just get into it for our listeners. Who is Kegan Gill, and what do you do?
Well, thanks for having me on, you guys. So I'm a former naval aviator. Just to get that out of the way.
There you go.
I flew F-18 Super Hornets in the Navy, and I managed to survive the fastest survived ejection in the history of naval aviation, which isn't necessarily a record you want, but with that came a lot of hardship and struggle, which is kind of why I think I'm here today, is to share that journey back to where I'm at today, talking to you, looking you in the eye, because it's been an adventure, to say the least.
Yeah, man, if you don't mind, and I would, we both had listened to, the podcast you did, the 4-part series on, I think it's Medevac podcast, which you went into detail in your story. And I'd love for you to just kind of give our listeners that story, because what a fascinating, incredible story. But also I just reminisce. I was just thinking, Stu, one just a quick plug on saying hello. Stu and I are, I don't remember how we even connected with Alex Racy, but a local guy, hardcore, like badass dude that does like crazy stuff. Right. And we connected with him through some hellos. And today we have Kegan on because of a hello with Racy, who had a hello with you, who had a hello with us, man. And so I just really want to encourage folks, your life can be so much more rich through these hellos. And this podcast, it just kind of hit me that this podcast is an outpouring of just being willing to say hello, and you're rich. My life is so much more rich, and I'm just like super excited about this podcast episode, because like I said, the story is any of our listeners is gonna suck you in immediately. So I turn it back over to you just to kind of give us, that scenario, what happened that day, and run it down for us.
Yeah. And thank you to Alex Racy, just like a serious superhuman. Just in a 5-minute conversation with that guy, he was giving me life recommendations on fitness stuff that I had no idea about, and just incredible superhuman. So shout out to that dude. He's freaking awesome. But yeah, my story, I guess I'll just start kind of on that day that this all went down. It was January 15th, 2014. I had already completed naval flight training. I spent 2 years getting my wings of a naval aviator, and then I selected the Super Hornet platform, the F-18 Super Hornet, headed to Virginia Beach to VFA 106, where I trained for the course of a year to get qualified in the F-18 and I had been picked up by VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs, out of NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. So on this day in January, I had been in the squadron about 8 months. So to put that in perspective, I was no longer the FNG, but I was definitely still drinking heavily out of that fire hose and knowledge to catch up and figure out what was going on, because that world is incredibly complex. But I was starting to get my feet under me. Um, I had just gotten qualified with my Jehemix helmet, which is the joint helmet mounted cueing system. It's this really cool space age sort of looking visor that goes on your helmet, and wherever you look with your head, your displays will go. So you can train your weapon systems, your radar, your FLIR. It's a really cool piece of kit, but it can be a little distracting, which became a factor on this day. To paint the picture, our aircraft carrier, the Eisenhower, was currently in that day it was in the dry dock in Portsmouth getting some maintenance done on it for our next deployment. So we were operating off the shore at NAS Oceana. I came into the ready room that day. My good friend Fisty and squadron mate, he was at the ready room desk, standing squadron duty officer. And he's one of those guys who's larger than life. He's like Chris Pratt became a naval aviator, basically. And as a joke that day, he had put up on the whiteboard in the ready room all these GPS tagged sharks that were out in the Atlantic Ocean where we were going to be flying over. And he had the airspace we were flying in drawn over it. So you could see, like, I'm flying out to this place. Oh, there's this shark in that airspace or under that airspace. And it just so happened on this day, there was a 3,500 pound, 16-foot great white shark named Mary Lee directly underneath the airspace I was going to be using. And on top of that, it was below freezing air temps. We had a cold January, even cold for Virginia Beach, excuse me. And the water temperature out at the buoy nearby, underneath where I was going to be flying, was at 37 degrees Fahrenheit water temperature. So icy cold water, freezing cold air, which meant we had to wear dry suits, which as pilots, we always grumble about having to squeeze into these sweaty dry suits, not thinking you'd ever
those
have to
things
actually
suck.
use it. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Anyways, got ready for the flight, went down, got my dry suit on, all my gear, my Jehemix helmet. And these are the kind of things you don't want to drop. The Jehemix, I think, cost well more than my house. At the time, I think it was like $280,000 for one. So with inflation, who knows what that is nowadays. Anyways, got dressed.
$3,572 with
Yeah,
current day
seriously.
inflation.
Seriously. Walked for the flight, took off. Our initial mission that day was just to do some air-to-air refueling. We had a ARS refueling pod come out of maintenance that just needed to get checked out to make sure that worked. So this refueling pod was attached to another Super Hornet flown by my friend Buddy, call sign Hipster. And then my flight lead was my commanding officer, my skipper that day, and I was on his wing. So we went out to the working area about 50 miles offshore Virginia Beach over the Atlantic, and we took some plugs off this thing. So put out a little fuel probe, flew up to the basket, and got some fuel air to air, which was good proficiency practice for all of us, especially me being a newer guy. I hadn't had the opportunity to do that a whole lot, but that all went smoothly. And we had some extra fuel and airspace and time. And with that, we went out and practiced probably the epitome of what people think when they think fighter pilot, which is dogfighting, air to air combat, or as we call it, BFM, basic fighter maneuvering. We set out in the working area. The tanker jet split off from us, and we started to do some rounds of this fighting, which is kind of like a round in martial arts or boxing. You know, you fight until there's a clear winner or loser, and then we reset and fight again. So as expected, my skipper's just kicking my ass. This is a dude with over 15 years of fighting these tactical aircraft. He really knew his art, but in the military, as you guys know, that's how we train a lot of time. You gotta jump in the ring with Mike Tyson and get your ass kicked enough until you rise to that level. And we hit Joker fuel. So we were just about out of fuel for the day. We reset our bingo bugs down to bingo fuel, and we had just enough time on our transit back home to maybe get out one more set. So we ended up setting up a little bit lower and a little bit faster than typical. No big deal. Called the fights on. And as we pitched in at each other, you can think of this as like two medieval knights jousting. So you're pointing your jets at each other and you're hauling ass, flying at each other, oftentimes over the speed of sound, especially your closure rates like 1,200 miles per hour. So as we're coming across each other's paths, I was already in a 30 degrees nose low dive. So I was partially inverted and sort of pointed down at the ocean. I opted to roll my jet fully inverted and pull down towards the ocean in a nose low split S maneuver. So just a big dive down at the ocean. Normally, that can be accomplished in the Super Hornet in under 5,000 feet pretty easily. We were up at 12,500 feet when this fight started. We were at 10,500 feet at the merge. So in my mind, I had plenty of airspace to execute this maneuver. However, just in the few seconds of being distracted by this new Jehemix helmet, I was trying to take acquisition and play with the HOTAS or the buttons to control it, sort of like an elaborate video game. And in just those few seconds, the jet had accelerated to a higher airspeed than I had realized. And as I dove the jet nose low, it accelerated. I had the stick all the way back in my lap. So I was pulling about 7.5 Gs. So say my head and my helmet combined weighed about 20 pounds at 1 G. So just standing on the ground at almost 8 Gs now, that's like 150 pounds on just my head. Not to mention my body now weighs almost 1,500 pounds. So you can feel that throughout your whole body. And as I hit bullseye nose low, the aircraft had accelerated to a point where it enacted this logic called the G bucket. Now, the G bucket is designed to prevent overstresses of the aircraft when there's bombs on the wings. Now, there were no bombs on the wings. However, somebody that had flown the aircraft prior to me had programmed it for an air-to-ground mission. So it had programmed simulated ordnance in the computer. And because of the way we had done the hot switch for the aircraft, I didn't have a chance to check that control panel that you put that information is, because it's actually right in front of the right engine that you leave on when you do what's called a hot switch, where you leave the aircraft running and another pilot swaps into it. So I didn't realize that, nor would I probably even made the connection, but basically the aircraft thought there were bombs on the wings that weren't there. And because of that, it tried to protect from that overstress by reducing the G on the aircraft. In the Super Hornet, we say you're like a voting member of the flight control system because it's so complex and it's all these computers, air data computers. It's thinking about way more than just what you're doing with the stick. And because of that, I have the stick in my lap. I'm telling it to pull as hard as it can. And instead, it eased up to around 5 Gs. And that would be like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, I'm now stuck in a dive at the ocean. And the road I'm skidding off of is the air right into the ocean. And this all happens in a matter of seconds. I didn't have a time to think through all the things I just explained to you. All I knew was all of a sudden this jet's not turning and I'm pointed at the ocean. That's not good. My heart sunk, got that feeling in the pit of my stomach, like if you ever get pulled over by the police and you're just like, oh, this is going to be bad. And in the few seconds I had to try to figure out what was going on, I pulled the throttle to idle. I put out the speed brake in a desperate attempt to slow down. And before I knew it, I just had a face full of ocean. And at 2 seconds before impacting the ocean, I was at 51 degrees nose low. So a very steep dive. I was at 695 miles per hour, which in the aircraft was displayed as 604 knots indicated airspeed or 0.95 indicated Mach. So I was almost the speed of sound in what's called the transonic region, which is where the sound barrier is at. This is back in the 50s and 60s when the guys were trying to break the sound barrier. That was where the engineers said, you can't go through that. It's a wall of air that is so powerful at that airspeed, you can't break through it. And that's the airspeed I ejected at. And a normal ejection is pretty violent. It'll compress guys' spines, cause flail injuries. Sometimes guys permanently lose a little bit of their height. I was well outside the envelope of what was supposed to be survivable, but I didn't have any other option. And at 2 seconds before impacting the ocean with the jet, I pulled the ejection handle. Coming out, I impacted that airflow, impacted the sound barrier with my body. And It ripped my helmet off my head, smashed my head, giving me a severe traumatic brain injury, or like a bad concussion. I broke my C1 spinal process, which is the top vertebrae, the little spine that sticks off of it. Fortunately, that didn't sever my spinal cord. I shattered my left scapula, my left shoulder. I had bilateral humerus fractures, so both my upper arms. My right humerus tore through my right brachial artery, causing rapid internal bleeding. My left forearm shattered the radius and ulna and severed the median nerve that controlled my left hand. Then my lower legs were flailing around so violently in that airflow with steel-toe boots on them that they smashed each other open. So you can imagine like some medieval maces just violently smashing back and forth. Smashed open my tib fibs and my lower legs. Open leg fracture, open leg fractures with chunks of my bone now falling down into the ocean for Mary Lee to chum the water. My survival vest, all the gear on it, pretty much shredded off. It was so fast it ripped the gear off my vest. I was wearing that dry suit, but because of the airflow, it shredded the dry suit open. It almost shredded the clothing right off my body. It was so fast. My face was all battered black and blue. My eyes were swollen up. It looked like I'd just lost a fight after 15 rounds in the ring. And in that second and a half I had left after the ejection sequence, that gave enough time for the parachute to fully deploy and slow me enough so that I didn't die and impact with the ocean water. And the next thing I knew, that parachute that had just saved my life sunk into that churning open Atlantic Ocean water and started to drag me under. We have a system on the parachute called the Seawers that's on the parachute risers that connects to your harness. And what the Seawers is supposed to do is when you go into salt water, it sets off a small explosive device. And that is supposed to automatically disconnect your parachute for this very reason, which is in a high-speed ejection, you often have flail injuries where you can't use your arms anymore. So you can't reach up and manually disconnect your parachute. So that system failed. We have some Vietnam era gear and one of the charges fired, but didn't disconnect and the other one didn't even fire at all. So now I'm attached to this parachute that just started to drag me under. And for anybody who has been drug under and held underwater when you want a breath of air, you know that terrible feeling when you just want to get to the surface, but you can't. And so I was in and out of consciousness. I was inhaling water. I don't know how I didn't drown. Luckily, that LPU, the life preserver unit around my neck, had automatically inflated. And that gave me just enough buoyancy that on occasion I would float up to the surface, grab a breath of air, cough out some water, and then just get drugged back under again. And in the meantime, my flight lead, he had seen my parachute deploy, so he knew something was up. He got down low. He dropped a GPS mark of my location, and he spotted a fishing vessel about a mile off. So he initially tried to get them on maritime guard, the emergency frequency. Excuse me. They weren't answering, so he got down really low and really fast, and he thumped over their bow. So you can imagine a Super Hornet flying right over the bow of your fishing boat. That got their attention pretty quickly. They turned over to my position. He got them up on maritime guard, and he was able to direct them to my location. They weren't able to get me out. They threw a rope to me. It ended up just getting tangled in the paracord cord, and I had no ability to grab it with my arms being destroyed. But they at least provided a visual location for me, because at this point, the Atlantic Ocean is flowing with all these currents. I would have drifted way off of that initial GPS mark. My skipper, he stayed overhead as long as he could, coordinating with air traffic control and any other vessels in the area he could get before he had to bingo back to shore, which it's a miracle all the things he was able to do in such a short period of time, basically running on fumes. He got more aircraft overhead, and now there are two Navy H-60 Seahawk helicopters heading towards my position. One from HS-11, which was stationed on an aircraft carrier that was nearby. Also one from HSC-28 out of Norfolk that was just getting ready to go do a weapons exercise with some SEAL team guys. The HS-11 helicopter actually showed up first. They got overhead, and there was a miscommunication with their rescue swimmer. He thought I was on the fishing boat. So their guy jumped in the water, swam over to the fishing boat, and I'm not there. which ended up again being a crazy twist in fate, as they had been instructed, had they gotten me out of the water, to take me back to the aircraft carrier because they thought it was the closest medical facility. However, with my condition being so severe, I would have died once I got on board. They wouldn't have had the ability to take care of me properly. So this other H-60 Seahawk helicopter from HSC 28 showed up. They saw that first rescue swimmer swim towards the boat, and their pilot actually spotted my little bobbing head. They said, "Hey, he's not on the boat. He's over here." They turned their helicopter, got overhead, and their rescue swimmer Cheech that was on board that one, just the week prior, a Navy H-53 Sea Dragon had gone down almost in the exact same location. And because the Navy policy at the time was anybody who's involved in an aircraft accident has to be put onto a backboard before they're lifted into the helicopter in case they have spinal injuries. Because of that policy and his adherence to it, while I think everybody survived the initial crash of the helicopter, because it takes so long to put each individual survivor onto a backboard to lift them up into the helicopter, several of those crew members perished from hypothermia. So Cheech, the rescue swimmer, is coming off like the worst week in his career. Having that in the back of his mind, he realizes, hey, I'm not going to take the time to put this guy on a backboard. If he has a spinal injury, so be it, which I did. But if he dies from hypothermia, it doesn't matter. So he made the game time decision to just jump in. He swam up to me. He said he hooked into me and he got drug under with that parachute with me. And he said he looked down, and he had done this in the pool where he had been drug under, and he just sees the bottom of the pool. But he said to look down and just see this tangle of paracord and a parachute and just the dark blue abyss was pretty terrifying. But his training kicked in. He cut me loose of all that paracord, and he pretty quickly got me up into the helicopter. At this point, I had been in the water about an hour and a half. On the flight to Norfolk General, which was about a 40-minute flight from where we were at, I was in and out of consciousness, coding over and over again. He said it was the fight for their lives of all these crew members just to keep me alive, resuscitating me over and over and over again. They got me to Norfolk General, which is a level 1 trauma center. And fortunately, they had just the dream team on that day of the surgeons. They rushed me in, initially treated me for hypothermia. My core body temperature when I arrived at the hospital was at 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So I should have been dead from hypothermia. But they said, had my dry suit not ripped open and had I not gotten hypothermia to the extent I did, I would have bled to death through my open leg fractures and brachial artery bleed way before anybody rescued me. So again, another one of those crazy twists in this. They treated me. They pumped the water out of my lungs. They had to have multiple blood transfusions because I had lost so much blood. And once I was semi-stable, they cut off my G suit and what remaining gear I had on and rushed me into surgery and induced a coma. And over the course of the next week, I underwent over a dozen trauma surgeries. I had fasciotomies on all 4 extremities to open up all those compartments. From the tissue damage, all my limbs had just swollen up so tight that all the muscle was pushed up so tight against that fascia that surrounds the muscle that it was cutting off circulation. And not that long ago, that's when you just amputate a limb. Thanks to modern medicine and the things they can do in trauma surgery these days, it prevented me from being a quadriplegic had I survived it all. They opened up all those compartments to relieve that pressure so the circulation could continue. And then they rebuilt my skeleton with titanium nails and screws and steel plates, rods in my arms and my legs, steel plate on my forearm. So now my x-ray looks like Wolverine, which is pretty sweet. I then at this point,
They make
I
any
went through all
taller
these.
or anything? Like, did they add any
I
like
don't know, man.
any
Budget
height or
cuts,
muscles or anything? I don't know.
No, I had to do all that after the fact.
There you go. Hydraulics or
Uh,
something, man. That'd be cool.
yeah, bionic style. Um, if it was the Reagan years, they probably would have done that stuff, Budget cuts though. Uh, anyways, they got me back in one piece. I had a brachial artery bypass on my right arm to get that blood flow going good. And at this point, they're trying to get me out of the coma after a week of all these surgeries, and I'm just not coming to. All my squadron mates are at the ICU waiting room along with my family, and they're just kind of wondering, is he going to live? And the same guy who actually right before my flight, one of the more senior pilots in the squadron, Basil, had come up right before this flight, and he said, "Hey man, you just haven't done anything dumb enough yet to earn a call sign." And sure enough, now everybody's in this waiting room wondering if I'm going to live. And he goes, "Oh, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be fine." And so they took that and shortened it down to a makeshift acronym for SMURF, uh, which the politically correct cover story is I'm a short guy who turned blue from hypothermia in the ocean.
Yeah. Oh man.
So I finally at least earned a call sign after that. And another week had gone by. They didn't know if I was going to live, if I was just going to be brain dead vegetable. And one day, after about 2 weeks, the lights just started coming back on. I had no recollection of what had happened. I didn't know where I was. I actually thought they had like tied me down onto the bed or something because I couldn't move, but it was because I was paralyzed. It was like waking up out of a dream, but I was really disoriented between the head injury and all the drugs they had me on for pain management. But after a little while, the medical staff came in and they said, "Hey, I think they're just trying to be real with me. Hey, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to use your arms again, and your flying career is over." But in the back of my mind, I took that as a challenge to, I'm going to prove these people wrong. And so little by little, I just tried to move whatever I could, squiggle whatever I could. I took all my therapy very seriously. Um, After a couple weeks in the ICU, I was transferred down to Richmond, Virginia, to the polytrauma center they had there. And all day, every day was just therapy. From the moment I woke in the morning, I was doing speech therapy, vision therapy, kinesiotherapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, aqua therapy, like all these things, all day, every day. And I was grateful to be there. For the staff was very caring. They had good equipment and therapy. There were some shortcomings there. You know, the food was absolutely awful. So a big other was, hey, if we're going to spend all this money on treatments and therapists and all this, let's also fuel these individuals to heal. Um,
Hey,
Anyways, I
Kagan,
spent, yeah,
can I stop you just for 1 second?
of course.
I, as I'm hearing this story, I'm just so incredibly amazed that like all of these things happened, and most of them would would kill a person, right? Like, and somehow or another you survived. Like, and I'm just like, how? Like, how in the world did Kegan
Yeah.
Gill survive all of this stuff? And I listened to that 4-part series of you on the Medevac podcast, and I remember one of the things that you said, the stuff that you were doing prior to even jumping in a jet, right? And what are some of the things that you think can attribute to you even surviving, just from your health and mindset and all that kind of stuff?
Um, yeah, I think a big factor was um, that actually kept my body just from not disintegrating was the fact that I was very fitness oriented pretty much my entire life. I'd been really into skiing, growing up out west, getting to ski at Wolf Creek. I had really been into soccer and wrestling and weight training, and I had gotten really into CrossFit as I'd gotten into the military. And so I was strong. I was 5'7" dude, 180 pounds of lean muscle. My body could take it. And through that, training the body in that way, I think it also helps to build some resiliency of the mind. Um, I think going into it, that definitely helped. And the rest of it, I think, was divine intervention, you know.
Yeah.
But that definitely helped.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's I was hoping that that was your answer, because I think that a lot of people take their health for granted, and their
No
fitness
doubt.
in general, and just how much of an impact that has on a crazy situation that you would have never planned for, and just the idea of just being healthy, man, being fit, being of the right mindset, and being resilient, putting your body through hard things and stress. I think that's super important to um, going through something like this.
Yeah, no doubt.
Interesting. But okay, so back to your story. You're now awake and you're recovering. Um, what happens next in this fight for proving them wrong?
Yeah, so at this point, they had me loaded on over a dozen pharmaceutical meds. I was on initially I was on fentanyl, Dilaudid, oxycodone, OxyContin, tramadol, trazodone, amitriptyline. Just the list goes on of all these things they're giving me to help combat the pain and help me sleep. Um, they gave me one
And
called gabapentin or Neurontin. Oh yeah, go ahead.
those aren't like light drugs either.
No, these are all pretty heavy duty, and they were giving me lots and lots of them. Uh, all in large part to combat a lot of the nerve pain I was having was excruciating, especially in my left leg and foot. One of the nerves had gotten damaged down there, and it was causing this extremely painful sensation, like 10 out of 10 pain to randomly pop up. And sometimes it felt like my foot was just being crushed. Other times it felt like it was on fire or being electrocuted, or sometimes combination of all the above. And it didn't really seem to matter what they gave me. None of it was doing much. And then one day this guy showed up. He was a doctor, but he didn't look like a doctor. He had long hair. He had this like real chill vibe about him. He wasn't sort of the common sort of pretentious doctor buzzing with assistants that would come into there. Not all of them were bad, but some of them were a handful. Anyways, this guy comes in, super chill. He's got this little tote with him, and he goes, I need you to sign this. If you want to try this, I think it's something that could help with your pain. Now, in all those meds that they had me loaded up on, I was on like 2,400 milligrams a day of gabapentin, which is like a ridiculous dose of that stuff, plus all the other opioids and everything. I
You're
didn't have
lucky
to sign
that you're
anything for
lucky the
that.
thing that was trying to make you better didn't kill you.
Yeah, almost did.
That's no joke.
And anyways, he comes in and he's got this thing. It's called prolotherapy, which if anybody's out there suffering with chronic pain, look up prolotherapy. All it was he took out a bag of glucose, so sugar water, and a little hypodermic needle. He filled that syringe up, and then all along the areas of my leg where I was having this just severe pain, he injected these little pockets of the sugar water subcutaneously. So it looked like just little mosquito bites underneath my skin, little bumps all up and down my leg and my foot. And within about 10 minutes of him doing this, that nerve pain I had in my foot that was so severe decreased by at least 90% permanently from sugar water under my skin. Who'd have
That's
thought?
crazy, man.
Despite that, they kept giving me more pain meds, even though I didn't ask for them. After 3 months, I was able to get around on a walker. It was really just every day was just sort of like, what can I do today? What can I do to get better? Maybe I can wiggle my foot today. Maybe I can wiggle my pinky today. And little by little, all these parts of my body that they said would never work started to function again. And after 3 months, I was released into outpatient therapy. I went back to Virginia Beach and I started doing outpatient therapy pretty much every day. On top of that, luckily, one of my squadron mates, Uncle Smugs, he's affectionately known. His wife, Amanda, was a gifted physical therapist. And she was, I think, pretty burnout at working with people who were unmotivated to get better at the main clinic. And so when she came and started working with me, I think it kind of helped keep her motivated about her job. And I loved it because the first day she showed up with a water bottle and on the side it said patient's tears. I was walking with a cane at the time because I was still hobbling around pretty bad. First thing she did was snatch that out of my hand and just chuck it. It was like, I don't ever want to see you walk with that again. And then she
That's awesome.
proceeded to just unleash these sort of high intensity interval training style workouts, CrossFit, all this, just kicking my ass. And I loved it. And after several more surgeries, I had to overcome all that prescription drug addiction I had, which was miserable and damn near killed me. The pain management clinic's guidance was just to stay on all of it. It's working for you. You don't need to stop. And I was kind of like, screw that. I'm not going to be on this stuff any longer. And I slowly just tapered myself off one at a time. And most of them actually weren't that bad. The opioids were a challenge, but the worst one was actually the one that wasn't supposed to be addictive, which was the gabapentin or Neurontin. which they're supposedly giving you as an alternative to the opioids. But that one made me damn near go crazy getting off of. I just felt so sick and weak. But after several months of slowly tapering off that 2,400 milligrams a day, I was in the clear. And with Amanda's help and a lot of friends' support, getting me back out, hanging out again, bringing me back into the strike fighter community. I was able to max out the Navy PRT again. I was literally running circles around most of the people at my command. And the Commodore of the base noticed, and he's like, this guy's crushing it. I had to go through a whole FNAB investigation, which is anybody who is in a Class A mishap, crashes an aircraft or does any serious damage to an aircraft, you have to go through this very intense board. So they do an investigation. There's also these interviews. And this had taken months and months and months. And it all culminated meeting with the Admiral at Norfolk. And I go into this big boardroom. There's a huge wooden table. It's got to be like 12 feet long. And either side is flanked by experienced naval aviators from all different communities. And they had kind of done a pre-interview with me. And then they called the Admiral in. And he comes in, everybody stands at attention, and has us all sit. And I look across the table at him, and the only question he asked me was, Lieutenant Gill, are you fearless? And I just kind of thought for a moment, and I don't know what came over me. I just looked across the table and said, sir, I don't remember a lot from the ejection, but I'm certain what little bit of cushion there is on the ejection seat was puckered up inside me real tight. He didn't laugh.
Awesome.
He didn't say a word. He just stood up and walked out of the room. I was kind of like, oh man, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say.
Yeah, right.
But a few minutes later, one of the Navy captains that was in there called me into his room, and he handed me this bin full of lifesavers, little mints. And he said, here you go. I took a lifesaver out and popped it in my mouth. And he said, congratulations. If you can get your body back to health, you can go back flying. And that gave me so much motivation to just keep charging. While I was certainly at fault in part for the accident, there were these other factors like the control system issue that had killed several pilots prior to me or caused mishaps. And even after my ejection, that same system killed a experienced Top Gun graduate doing a low level where he was going around a low corner, pulling the jet for all it's worth, and all of a sudden that system enacted and slammed him into the side of a canyon wall. So there are other factors, and luckily in the world of naval aviation, as you know, you get judged by other aviators. I think in the world of the public, you think, oh, a pilot makes a mistake, they're going to burn him at the stake and you're out of here. Fortunately, that's not the case. There's a lot that can be learned from these mishaps. And assuming you're not doing something blatantly stupid or illegal or breaking the rules, you can often get another shot and take that experience forward with you and share that with the fleet, which is invaluable. So I was fortunate to get that opportunity. Again, I'd gotten my physical health back. I felt good mentally. I had to get a stack of medical waivers, nearly as tall as I am, which isn't saying a lot, but after all of that, they got me back to VFA 106, and I did a refresher training course in that Super Hornet. I graduated as top stick in my class, and I went back to the fleet to VFA 136, the Nighthawks. And this is kind of where the Disney version of my story would end, a happy ending. Unfortunately, some of my struggles continued. I think a lot of it I had been sort of just ignoring my mental health stuff. I'd been so focused on the present and getting my body and the flying and the studying that I just kind of was able to bury a lot of that. I had gone on a flight down at Tyndall Air Force Base. We were doing a weapon shoot. So I got to fire a live 9 mic Sidewinder heat-seeking missile at this drone and fight a F-22 Raptor on the back end of that in what's called DACT, or dissimilar air combat training. So dogfighting an F-22 Raptor, which was, I mean, surreal. Like, this is the thing I saw at air shows as a kid. I was like, that's a alien spacecraft. And there I was up in the sky getting to watch this thing up close and personal in a fight. And that was incredible. But I came back from the flight and I realized that big chunks of the flight were missing from my memory. And I was watching my tapes. I realized I didn't remember a lot from the missile shoot. And I just kind of ignored it, like I had been ignoring some of these little glitches, mental glitches that had been popping up, and pushed through the next day. I was just on duty, so I was answering the phone and the radio, not really feeling clear in my head, kind of anxious, getting this almost like panic attacks, but just kind of pushed through the day. And that night I went back to the hotel room. And when I sat on my bed in the hotel room in the stillness, it just felt like the room was tumbling around me. I got really bad vertigo. Um, I tried to set my alarm because I had a flight in the morning. I couldn't do the math or operate the alarm on my phone properly. I was so mentally uh, incapable in that moment. And I started to get these just panic attacks, crazy insomnia. I couldn't sleep again. So I called the squadron safety officer, and I told him what was going on and that maybe I had decompression sickness because we had had some issues in the Hornet, especially, and also the Super Hornet community, where the environmental control system would have this malfunction that could cause rapid decompression in the cabin. And for any scuba divers out there, you know, if you come up from depth of the ocean too quickly, the nitrogen in your blood can come out of solution. And if you get that in your joints, it's called type 1 DCS, and it can be really painful. But if you get one of those bubbles in your brain, that's called type 2 DCS, and that can cause aneurysm or death. It's basically like getting a block in your brain where the blood flow doesn't operate properly, and it can cause TBI, brain injury. So my thought was maybe this is an ECS issue. And so they took me to Mayport Dive Base, which was about 20 minutes away from Tyndall, where we were at. And they rushed me into a hyperbaric chamber. And over the course of the night, they treated me for decompression sickness, breathing pure oxygen, hanging out in this little tube with a Navy diver, corpsman. And by the next morning, I felt a little bit better. The Navy doc had me come back into the base and talk to him in the morning. And he said, you know, maybe you had decompression sickness, but I think there's more going on than just that, looking at your medical record. And so he's like, when you get back, I want you to see the doc, which, as you guys know, in the military, you don't want to have to see the doc because that could be the end of your career. But I knew something wasn't right. And when we got back to Lemoore, California, where the Nighthawks were stationed, I went in kind of reluctantly to see the flight surgeon. And before long, they had me see in the psychology department, and I had a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis, which I think was probably part of the issue. But the TBI piece was really overlooked. And I think had that been treated differently at the time, I might still be flying for the Navy. But the approach largely was initially just see psychology. They gave me some apps on my phone to do this cognitive behavioral therapy app and this other app and this app. And then all my meetings were basically just come in and tell them how the app went. And that was incredibly frustrating because in my mind, I have this serious deficits. I have this crazy anxiety and this paranoia that's developing, hypervigilance, and I can't sleep. My insomnia is out of control. And all you want to do is give me some apps. Well, that progressed to like,
and
okay,
more meds, right?
And yeah, this is where the meds came in. Like, oh, well, these apps aren't working and our little talk sessions aren't working. So here, how about you try some of these psych meds? And that's where things really spiraled out of control into insanity. The meds didn't help, except maybe briefly. They suppressed some of the symptoms, knocked me out at night. I'd get a little bit of sleep, but the same problem kept happening is my body adjusted, and then I needed more meds and more meds. And before long, I was going in and out of full-blown psychoses. So anybody who's ever seen A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, where he creates this whole elaborate world around him that's not actually happening, that's what was happening to me. I thought I was being hunted by government assassins. I stopped eating and drinking because I thought it was being poisoned. I was, in fact, being poisoned by the government, but it was through the little pills that I was being prescribed. And the insanity of it all was the more I went in and said it's not working, the more of the meds they gave me, primarily one called Seroquel or quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic that was prescribed to me for my insomnia. But over time, I needed more and more of that. And with more and more of that came worse and worse side effects. My wife had just had our little boy. He's a newborn baby. She's trying to take care of a newborn baby. And now she's got me, a full grown, capable adult who thinks he's being hunted by assassins 1 minute to the next. And so it was incredibly stressful for her. Um, the treatments they were offering were just making things worse. Eventually, I was medically retired from the Navy after a long battle through a medical board, which I jokingly call is the bureaucratic equivalent of the Indiana Temple of Doom. It's riddled with these booby traps for you to fall through. Um, Luckily, I had the support of my command. I had the support of my wife to help navigate that whole thing. Had I not had them, I would be homeless or dead, no doubt. But as this progresses, I'm just broken. I'm losing my career. All hope of going back flying kind of got killed with these psych meds, and I was just broken and in and out of these psychoses. And one night, I don't know if it was actually thunderstorming or if I just imagined it, but it was this dark, stormy night. My wife and my little boy are sleeping next to me, and I kept a pistol in my end table next to the bed. And I was so miserable. I felt like I was letting the guys in my squadron down. Like this was all just in my head. Like, why can't I just get over this? This isn't even a real thing. This is just my imagination. Why am I so screwed up? Uh, and I got really depressed, and I was ready to see what that pistol tasted like in my mouth. I wanted to know, what does the gun oil taste like on my tongue? What is the barrel going to feel like on my teeth? And as I'm reaching for this, I just look over at my little boy sleeping next to my wife. And I was like, I can't have them wake up to that. And so I put the pistol back and I laid back and went to bed. But had they not been there in that moment, I wouldn't be here. Um, Eventually battled through that medical board. I had to have my case appealed. Despite having a stack of medical records and everything that I had going on, I nearly didn't even have a medical retirement with all of that. But fortunately, it worked out. Moved back to northern Michigan with my family, and my psychoses continued, and that same insanity of treatment continued, which was more Seroquel, more Seroquel. And I'd gotten to this point where I was on 300 milligrams of Seroquel a night. I'd gone into the VA psychiatrist up here in northern Michigan, and they increased that dose up to 450 milligrams a night. And within 2 nights of increasing the dose to that high, which is a truly heroic dose of that medication, my wife came home from a job interview, and she heard me rustling around in the house. And when she came in, she found me. I had shaved off all my hair in chunks. I had shaved off my eyebrows, what facial hair I had at the time. I was completely naked, except I had a black plastic garbage bag tied around my shoulders like a cape, because I thought I was like a superhero, like Batman or something.
I'm not
And I
trying to
was going to
laugh,
go.
man.
No, it's funny now. And I think even my wife was probably like, oh my God, I had to laugh in that moment. Um, but I thought I was going to go fight crime in the snowy Michigan weather dressed like that. Uh, Anyways, my wife loaded me up in her car, drove me the hour into Traverse City to the emergency room. And I spent, I think, a couple nights in the ER, just having a full up out of body experience. I was traveling through space and time and just completely out of my mind in this little plexiglass room they had me in. Um, they ended up loading me into an ambulance and driving me down to Battle Creek, Michigan, which is about 4.5 hours from where we live. And so my wife loaded up our little boy. My mom and dad came down, and not knowing how long we were going to be down there, my wife applied for the VA caregiver program, was denied that, which is supposed to be for spouses that have to take care of uh, their significant other in a similar crisis. She was denied that, which would have allowed her some money for a hotel room. So she just found basically the cheapest motel, not knowing how long we were going to be there. And it was so filthy, she had to go to a Kmart or a Walmart or something and get cleaning supplies to clean the floor, because my little boy was learning how to walk. So he's crawling all over this filthy floor of this crappy motel, just so she could bring him in every day so I could see him, which was really what pulled me out of a lot of the darkness I was in. I came to in this VA mental hospital. It was a nightmare. And there was some of it I know, I imagine, and looking back, I've been able to kind of reconstruct what happened and taken out what was fake and what was real. But one thing that was very real was you're confined in this small space. You are treated less than human by much of the staff. You're just a crazy person at this point. You're literally dressed like a prisoner in prison scrubs. You're being fed prison food, just nutrient void garbage. And every 15 minutes, somebody comes into your room in the night to wake you up with a flashlight to make sure you're safe. These are all the things that you would do to an enemy combatant to break them, to make them comply with you. Sleep deprivation, confinement, treat you less than human. Um, we were lucky if we got to go outside once a week into a concrete yard that was surrounded by these 8-10 foot tall metal gates. That was our outdoor experience. There's no exercise, there's no nutrition. Um, and instead of trying to break you for information, what it seemed like was they were trying to break you in order to get you to comply with whatever pills they wanted to put you on. I had met with the psychiatrist there. We had agreed to one medication, but when they handed me my meds, it was full of a bunch of other meds that I didn't know what they were. And when I tried to say, I don't want to take all these things that I don't know what they are until I see a psychiatrist, it was immediately I was non-compliant. Despite being voluntarily admitted there, I was not allowed to leave when I wanted to leave, seeing that this place was not the place for healing at all. I mean, you take a fully capable 20-year-old in the peak of their fitness, from the special forces community or pilot, and you put them through SEER school. If you sleep deprive somebody, deprive them of nutrition, and confine them, within a few days, those people start to have mental breaks. They start to have visual and auditory hallucinations. Now you take people that are already in their darkest moment, you do the same stuff to them, and that's somehow supposed to help them get better. It was just complete madness. I was so frustrated that I ended up planning an escape. One night when one of the staff members came in and shined that light in my face again, depriving me of sleep, I ran out into the hallway and I pulled the fire alarm. My thought was they would let us outside, and those of us that were with it could make a run for it. A lot of the people there were so drugged, they were just completely out of their minds, and broken. They would have just herded them back inside like sheep. But there were some of us there that did not want to be there, that wanted to get out. And unfortunately, I think somebody had tried this trick before. They didn't let us go out. All they did was call the base security. They ended up injecting me with a medication called Haldol, which made me feel like there were ants or insects underneath my skin trying to burrow their way out. All I wanted to do was tear my skin off and run and scream up and down the halls. I don't know what else they put me on after they injected me with that stuff. But within the next day or two, I remember I could barely walk on my own. I was literally drooling on myself, and I got called into this office with a woman that was supposed to be my legal representation. And she had a stack of paperwork. And despite the fact that I could barely recite my name, she had me scribble on these documents, which ended up declaring me mentally defective permanently. It also stripped my constitutional right to bear arms. I'm no longer allowed to own or purchase a firearm. I lost my concealed carry permit because of that. And now if I'm ever pulled over by law enforcement, I come up in the law enforcement information network as if I had committed a crime. Again, I had not committed any crime. I had not been violent. All I had done was I was an American veteran that tried to go and get some help. And instead, my life was just destroyed. Eventually, my family was able to get me out of there, only because both my parents had worked in healthcare and my wife was a nurse. They were able to vouch that they would take medical custody and they could provide the care I needed at home. All the other guys, almost everybody else in that place, they don't get that opportunity. So I was lucky to escape at all. Had I remained in there much longer, I probably would have killed a staff member out of frustration, or I don't know, just be completely zonked out on the drugs they were giving people and there by force. I was fortunate to get out, and I was just a broken human when I got out. My wife said, "You're not the same person anymore." It just broke my heart seeing what was going on in there. To all these American veterans that had served their country, and that's the way they got treated, um, is truly atrocious. Um, yeah, maybe the VA's gotten better since the Vietnam era when you would come back from war that you got drafted into, loaded up with morphine, and then wheeled out in a wheelchair, missing limbs, and say, good luck with your life. Yeah, it's gotten better than that, but we still have a long ways to go. Um, Somehow I managed not to be divorced from my wife, though that was definitely on the table. I was just an angry shell of a human. The only emotion I ever felt was anger, if anything. Most of the time I was just numb. My little boy would come up to try to play with me, and I would just tell him to leave me alone. I could barely do the dishes. I was just broken. And when I went back to the VA, the only thing they wanted to do was give me more Seroquel and more psych meds. And so, with what little mental capacity I still had left, I stumbled upon a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And that's when I discovered the world of uh, psychedelic therapy. And then over the course of the next couple of years, I was fortunate to get the opportunity to partake in some of these indigenous medicines, which um, gave me my life back, and gave me new hope for life. And not only did it heal my brain, a lot of these substances like iboga or ibogaine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, these things have chemical components that help your brain create neuroregenerative properties. So they essentially can help put your brain back into a mode like it's at when you're a toddler, and help your brain regrow, which helps tremendously with brain injury. Um, but it also helped heal me on a deeper level, a spiritual level. It helped heal my soul from everything that I've been through. And it wasn't just a matter of going and doing these medicines. It was also the matter of integrating what I had learned after the fact to improve my habits, my health, and my day-to-day life, my mindset. And little by little, though, these things helped me rebuild. I was fortunate to go to a TBI clinic down in Dallas through Defenders of Freedom and the Resiliency Brain Clinic down there. And after a 2-week TBI clinic, so much of my mental faculties had returned in just 2 weeks. And to now know all the things that I've been exposed to, these sort of the hidden back door of medical treatments, if a lot of these could be allowed and available to active duty service members and others, how many people not only could still be in the military, we could improve retention, we could improve performance if we were trying to optimize people's health with little check-ins every year or two where you get to go through some of these clinics to kind of help shed um, everything that comes with being in the military off. And I'm not talking about having to do psychedelic therapy, but some of these TBI clinics for guys that are in communities where you're exposed to blasts and gunfire or or just the stress, the chronic stress of the military world. Uh, we could optimize people's health that are in and retain a lot more seniority, a lot more skill and knowledge in the military, which would be it would be an investment well worth making. Um, but since then, I went from somebody who could barely do the dishes to I've written a book, which is currently under review with the DoD. Hopefully, will be out in the next year. I've been doing a number of speaking gigs. I've been competing in ultra endurance events. So I've been getting my body back. I've been getting my mind back, and I can't be more grateful. And despite all the hardship of it, I'm thankful for it all because it's made me who I am today. And now I've got two beautiful little kids, a family, my wife, and like you guys were saying at the beginning of the show, these connections. Um, and it's a lot of these connections that have helped pull me through this stuff. Um, Anyways, that's most of it in a nutshell.
And what a fascinating story. And I I just want to express gratitude to you for having the strength and the courage to share, those lowest moments. Cause I think, one of the things that we oftentimes forget, especially in this, in this, in the brotherhood, the sisterhood of arms is the idea that our weakness could be somebody else's salvation, right? Like, being able to express, and I say weakness, I caveat that and I quote it because it's truly a strength, right? Like going through something like this, being able to share it, being vulnerable, being honest, it also challenges the idea that, hey, just take some of these pills, or that everybody has your best interest in heart. And I don't look at the VA and think, man, there's a bunch of really terrible people there.
No, not at
As
all.
you get to know them, you're like, man, there's some really good people who really want to help, but a lot of it is you default to your training, right? You default to, it's not even a moral issue. A lot of times it is a moral issue in my mind, but it's not that person making a conscious decision, a conscious moral decision to, to hurt you. It's just
Right.
what we understand. And it's just fascinating to me that, some of the alternative treatments that you talk about, but also if we have more vets who are willing to just share and be open and to go to that place of vulnerability and that place of pain, a lot of folks benefit from that, right? A lot of us, I mean, if I don't drink, if I'm a teetotaler and you're struggling with alcoholism, like I'm not your guy. Like I'm not the guy you want to talk to, right? Like
Right.
you want to talk to the recovered alcoholic. Like that's who you
No
want to
doubt.
talk to. You want to talk to someone who's been through the struggle. And so I really appreciate you being open and honest about this. And one of the things that you mentioned that I heard you speak on previously, and you kind of touched on here with your family, but what Stu and we're so passionate about the idea of, especially men, for us men coming together and in relationship, right? And being real and being honest and having that environment. You mentioned that before, that your boys like brought you through a lot of this pain. They brought you
Oh
through a
yeah.
lot of like the relationships to have these friendships. And do you mind touching on some of that and just the intentionality of relationship in the process of healing?
Yeah, I mean, just from when I got out of the hospital after I'd been living in that poly trauma center for 3 months, my squadron mate and friend Fisty, he, I was in a rough relationship with a woman that, is a whole nother part to the story, but he knew what was going on and he showed up and he freaking pulled me out of that situation, loaded me into his Jeep with a duffel bag, and he drove me off, took me into his house. And my buddy Vinny, they just kind of took me in like a stray freaking dog, and they helped to get me out. And we're like, hey, we know you're all broken up and you're on a walker, but we're gonna go out wake surfing. You want to go? And they would take me out on their boat. They would take me out to Chick's Oyster Bar in Virginia Beach or wherever they're going to hang out and socialize. And that helped to like get me back out and see like, people care. And I was really amazed to see the amount of support and respect that came through what I had struggled with. And there was a lot of time in there that I was like, man, people are going to hate me, for whatever reason. That's just the narrative that I told myself. Come to find out, these people care so much and they only wanted to see me get better. Um, and then down the road, as I was really struggling, um, I kind of cut my squadron mates off. Which is no fault of theirs. It was me. I was so ashamed that I'd gone through all that and then wasn't able to be there and be part of their squadron. And so I had largely cut those guys out. But at the same time, I had also reached out to some of the nonprofit organizations that are out there. One being Operation Surf was the first one I ever made contact with. And Van Carrazza, this legendary big wave surfer, put together this program where they take out vets and first responders and just take them out surfing. And I had seen their documentary on Netflix resurface, and guys dealing with TBI and PTSD that suicidal could reach out to this organization and they take you out in the ocean. And they've got all these instructors that are like legendary pro surfers and stuff, you know they get you out and they get you stoked and they get you in the ocean, and through that I saw how much nature is a healer. as well as just getting to connect with that community of really positive, upbeat human beings. That helped me pull through some of that darkness, um, and kind of all along the way in my recovery, be it family or friends or these nonprofit organizations, I've made those connections and made friends, and all it takes is just one of those people to like help reconnect you with the world. And, you're not going to get along with everybody, and it's you know, but all it takes is one person to connect and reach out and say you're hurt, and that's probably the hardest thing for guys in our world is just saying, "Hey, I need help," and asking for it and being vulnerable. Because when you do, you might be amazed at how many people care about you, and help pull you out of that darkness.
And that's such a good message for people to hear. I mean, David and I, we did 20 years of service, and we have friends that took their lives because of the same stuff that, I mean, not the same stuff that you went through, but PTSD,
Yeah,
TBI, anxiety, depression, like all these challenges that veterans have, specifically people that are leaving the military. So what do we tell these people? What do we tell the military and the veterans that are struggling in these areas of thoughts of suicide? And how do we defeat this? How do we defeat this crazy number of veteran suicides going on?
yeah, it's a serious challenge, and I've had the opportunity to speak with individuals, senior flight surgeons that got stars on their shoulders at the highest levels of the VA, and hearing their perspective on the VAs, and I totally agree with this. There's a ton of really good people working in the VA system, and want to help and are there for the right reasons. But at the end of the day, their policies are set by their ties to the pharmaceutical industry and their business interests. And I don't think the pharmaceutical industry is out to harm people, but they are out to make money as a business and a corporation. They're legally obligated to do so. And to do that, they're going to do things that best help promote their products. And unfortunately, that means many of the policies at the VA are determined by what's going to make the pharmaceutical industry money. And I don't think they didn't intentionally set out to make it that way, but that's the reality of it. Um, but really, the thing that I have hope for, I think the VA definitely helps people. I'm fortunate to receive some benefit through them, which has created financial stability in my life that would otherwise have led to me being, living under a bridge somewhere. Like, unfortunately, so many other service members who've done far more than I ever did in the military really are, living out on the streets. Um, but so there's a place for the VA, and I think that it's heading in the right direction, especially seeing where it was, back in the 1970s. We've come so far, and I think it's now our generation's turn to continue to push that to the next level, to continue to learn lessons and move it forward. And there is interest in the VA. I think Arizona, they have started ketamine therapy, which is a form of psychedelic therapy in a clinical setting, which is excellent to see that the VA is even open to something like that. And the results from some of this therapy, and I'm not saying that's for everybody, but these indigenous medicines have been in cultures for thousands of years, going back to prehistory, and they've been an integrated part of our societies. And we're kind of in a strange time in the world in that that's not really a part of our society. Um, and I think the integration of some of these indigenous medicines back into our healing communities, and maybe stepping away from all the focus on Western medicine a little bit, and seeing that some of this stuff isn't just a bunch of crazy hippies, dancing around a fire pit. Like, there's some legitimacy to those ancient healing methods. And in the meantime, um, what you guys are doing is incredibly important in this battle, is just sharing these messages of hope. I think we're really fortunate to live in this era of podcasts, and the fact that information can just be disseminated to anybody anywhere, at least for now, until whatever the internet gets shut down. But at least for now, we can share this information. And guys, Vietnam era and before, they were just alone with a bottle of whiskey to deal with these problems. They didn't have a podcast, and they thought it was the right thing to do is just to internalize it all and live with it, and not to get any help, because they thought help was weakness. So what you guys are doing is really important. I think another incredibly important step that's happening already is there are a wide variety of veteran nonprofit organizations that have been popping up like crazy. I think there's over at least 300 of these things, and they are organizations run by largely veterans who have seen the struggles that we have to go through in first responders and really the world over. But they're trying to bring these healing modalities to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to them. And then really, I have a friend named Adam Marr. He's a former Green Beret who went through a lot of these struggles. And he told me something that really stuck with me. He said, be the captain of your own ship. And I think that's something that hopefully from today, anybody can take away from this is, one, try not to let that hope die. And I hope this message I've been trying to share today gives you some hope and lets you know that you're not alone and that there are other options than taking pills the rest of your life and being miserable. But then what can you do to improve your health? Be it maybe start going for a 10-minute walk a day, maybe cut out some caffeine, maybe cut back a few drinks a day, maybe cut out a few cigarettes, whatever is in your life that's unhealthy. Maybe just start reversing some of those steps. And you might be inspired as you go along that path and you regain some of your health. Maybe try to eat some more fruits and vegetables. Maybe try to get some of the processed junk out of your diet. And it doesn't have to all be all at once in this extreme thing, because that doesn't work. If you just strip away everything in your life and just try to replace it with some new deal of fad diet or whatever, that never lasts. But just what can you do to take some direction in your health, in your mental health, and maybe your spiritual health to get better, because you have control of it. And don't let them kill the hope out of you where you don't think you do, because you do.
Man, I love it, dude. I love ending on the high note as well. I think you nailed it. It's that there is hope, right? Like you've experienced things that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, and you've come through, and it's an amazing story. And the number of folks that you're going to help that just listen, that, they may never even respond. They may never reach out. They may not do, I can't wait for your book to come out because it'll help even more folks. But just the idea that they could hear something, they could see an example set of hope and healing and really thriving, and that it's possible for all of us, man. I love that. And we do have ownership too, right? Like there is a responsibility that we need to put on ourselves too. And that's a beautiful thing. Like I love the sense of responsibility and ownership and power that comes with that. And so you take that, you share that, you get in a group, you get some, hope begets hope, and you can get better, man. I love it. And I just encourage all of our vets out there. Everybody's going through something, right? And if you're not a vet, you're going through something. And all of us do. And it's totally natural. It's totally normal. Nobody lives a perfect Instagram life, despite everything you're seeing online or whatever your favorite mechanism of voyeurism is. but it's not that great. Everybody's kids are brats. They're little a-holes at times. Nobody has perfect family photos on the first shot, like all these things, right? And I think it's good, man. That's what makes life beautiful. God created variety. There's challenge, there's diversity, there's adversity, and we can grow from all those things. So, dude, I love it. I appreciate you, and look forward to at some point getting to see you and meet you in person, man. This was a uplifting, beautiful conversation for me, and it just really generates a lot of hope for as we look forward and continue to press. So, thank you, brother.
Thank you, David and Stu. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. You're doing some important work, man. Just talking about this stuff is a huge step forward.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Where can people get more of Kegan? Where do we send people? How do they get in touch with you? And what are you excited about? What can we tell them to go check out?
Yeah, you guys can follow me right now. I'm on LinkedIn under Kegan Gill. You can also check out Instagram at Kegan Smurf Gill. I'm in the process of building a website right now. I've also got my book in the works. The title is Phoenix Revival. I'm working with Dead Reckoning Collective, which is a veteran-owned publishing company. As soon as the DoD gets that thing out of the DOPSR review, which they have to review it for operational security purposes, they've had it for about 6 months now with very little communication. So hopefully, if they don't burn that thing, it'll be out here before long. And if you follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, I'll keep you updated on there. And I'll keep you updated to my website and as things progress. I'm excited right now. I'm kind of with the big help of Alex Racy and our mutual friend Danny Pritchard. Those guys and Chris Hoth have been helping me get a speaking career going.
Nice.
I've really been enjoying getting in front of crowds in person and talking about a lot of this stuff. And there's a hunger for it right now, military and otherwise. Everybody is hungry for health and getting better and healing our world right now, because a lot of people are going through hell. It's been a rough time in a lot of ways, despite the benefits we have as being American citizens and some insulation to all that.
Yeah, man.
Anyways, yeah, I'll keep you guys posted if you
Awesome.
follow me on there.
Awesome. We'll post all that stuff in our show notes. Hey, guys and gals, reach out to Kegan. This was a powerful episode. And I love it, Kegan. There's tons of hope. Thank you for what you're doing, man. You're motivating, you're inspiring. Keep on plugging, keep on charging. And we greatly appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, gents.
Guys and gals, let's go take uncommon action.
Yeah, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. See ya.
Hey, would you be interested if I told you that I have a 4-step framework to become super successful and incredibly good looking? If so, grab a pen and take some notes, because here we go. Step 1, define what success looks like to you in your life and the most important aspects that you say are a priority. Not someone else's definition, but your own definition. From that, create a vision that breaks it down into daily action steps. Step 2, take action. Turn those steps into habits, track them, and know that there'll be challenges along your journey. Step 3, surround yourself with like-minded people that will hold you accountable to what you said you wanted to do, and know that they'll also be there to lift you up when it gets hard. Step 4, live in those newly created habits to form you into the type of person that you want to become through calendar level type change. We call it getting real at TKM. We reflect, we execute, we account, and we live. And we've discovered that you can accomplish anything with that framework. And that's exactly what the Kinetic Man is all about. We take uncommon action to live with no regrets and say yes to our best life. Now, most of this gets done inside our high-level mastermind that meets every week. But we've had great feedback, and we decided to start a new program called TKM Reflections, guiding men to take uncommon action. We're starting it in March, and we're going to meet once a month to guide you through redefining success in 9 critical aspects of your life, which we call the Kinetic Life Circle. You'll be asked some really hard questions. You'll be surrounded by like-minded warriors, and you'll walk away with a new definition of success and an action plan to live a life without regret. And here's what you get. You'll get video recordings to build your foundation. You'll come away with a new identity, core values, and a purpose. You'll have monthly live and recorded 1-hour video calls with the TKM staff. You'll get a downloadable copy of the Kinetic Life Plan, which is 50 plus pages of incredible content. And you'll get a community of men that you'll know fully and will call brother. And we're adding on some bonuses that normally only the mastermind members get. You'll get access to 4 monthly level up videos from our podcast guests. You'll get access to the quarterly investor pitch day, which is incredible. And you'll get access to our annual private retreat here in Colorado that's only for members. So you might be asking, who's this for? And I'll honestly say that it's for every man that's ready to step it up and live a life without regret. It's for the man who wants to redefine success and say yes to his best life. So now is the opportunity. Jump on this. Go to thekineticman.com/sign up. Again, thekineticman.com/sign up. Go take uncommon action. We'll see you there.
Thank you for listening to the Connect Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we could connect.
And on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.